Welcome back, everybody, into Bill's Chat. I am Josh McCarty. With me, as always, is Luka. Luka, it's not Christmas Eve, but it's pretty close. It's training camp Eve, and we are recording this on Monday night. The Bills will report to St. John Fisher on Tuesday. First practice is on Wednesday. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I think on McAfee today, since we're recording on Monday, they talked about how the NFC West is fully reported and it's it's real. It's all real now. The NFL is coming back. It's not just rookies reporting. It's not just a rookie mini camp. It's not some other offseason program. It is real deal. Return to football. Get back in the rhythm of things. And next thing you know, we are going to be talking about how some third stringer is just impressive as all being at camp, or for instance, if anyone follows just the NFL landscape as a whole, Cardinals individuals in the Marvin Harrison Jr. situation has been a fun one to track along, because one day it's everything's shot, another day it looks like he's hurt, and then the following day he's making a couple touchdown passes. Classic camp day to day headlines. And that is what we're about to get into now, as all of the roster for the Bills are reporting to St. John Fisher. And we are officially back and in it, Josh. Feels good.
Yeah, and what we want to do here is we understand that training camp, once training camp starts, episodes become dated pretty quickly. So if we were to sit here and record an hour and a half long preparing for training camp episode, and then the Wednesday practice happens, this episode loses value after Wednesday, after who's lining up first team left guard, and where's Chauncey Gardner Johnson lining up? Is he strictly a safety or is he a nickel? Who's winning the punter competition? So we're going to have an abbreviated episode. This is really a training camp primer. If you have, stepped away from this off season, or you've put the Bills in the back of your mind and you need a crash course of what am I supposed to be thinking about here? Real quick though, Luca and I, we've been doing this for a few years. I'll tell you, we do not buy into training camp hype. There will be videos, I'm sure, coming out about Keon Coleman or Joshua Palmer, Skylar Bell, who we're all excited about, making amazing catches in camp. And I'll be honest with you, none of it'll move me. The things that move me in camp is, one, the amount of snaps you get with the first team, specifically at positions like left guard where you don't rotate players. Two, injuries. Injuries are any camp practice that goes by without an injury is a successful practice. I don't care how many interceptions Josh Allen throws on that day, because none of them count in the stat sheet. And that's really it. It's trying to decipher what the team's going to look like. Outside of that, it is fun to think about, like, oh wow, TJ Parker looked good today. But remember, Curtis Samuel was unguardable in his first year here with the Bills. Keon Coleman was unguardable last year, and then, like, as the game started, it was like, oh, maybe it's because he was going against a washed up Tre'Davious White, and then Tre'Davious White ended up being one of their better players on defense, and Keon Coleman was a no show. So take it all with a grain of salt, but we have outlined some of the bigger camp stories to pay attention to. And Luca, right off the bat, I think the biggest story, not just for camp but for the season, is Joe Brady. It's one thing when you make a coaching change, but I think even as fans, as people that follow the team, you get so used to the habits of the head coach. And Sean McDermott had his way of doing things and saying things. I think about the injury report where Sean McDermott called a player week to week. You just knew you wouldn't see him for 3 or 4 weeks. If you called a player day to day, hey, he's back in the window where you can get excited about him playing. And McDermott was pretty open with the media in his own way, where you had to really know McDermott as far as like following his press conferences to read between the lines. He wouldn't just give you the information, but you could sometimes read between the lines. What's interesting about this with Joe Brady is, one, how open is he going to be? But two, he came up under Sean McDermott, who, again, kind of open, but he also came up under Sean Payton. And Sean Payton comes from that Bill Parcells tree, where it's these are state secrets. Sean Payton is the type of guy that on Wednesday, when you ask him about the right guard who got hurt in the previous game, is going to say, we'll let you know 90 minutes before the game starts when the injury report comes out. Like, that's how he answers. That's the way Parcells did it. It's the way Belichick does it. If Joe Brady does that, it's going to make these press conferences way less entertaining. What do you expect from Joe Brady as far as how he handles the press, how he handles the media, anything else? It doesn't have to be just injury report. Are you expecting drastic changes from how the head coach feels this year?
I don't know about drastic. I would say Joe Brady to myself comes off as a little bit more of he's not going to be Parcells like, in my opinion. It just doesn't feel like he has that in him in the sense of being cold, methodical, or just very short and to the point in the sense of you're not going to get anything out of him until he is, you know, legally required to kind of situation. It does feel like there will be a little bit more of a give and take with him. He seems like the type of personality that you may get some stuff, if it feels to him, the week to week moniker you had mentioned, if it that feels like something that also he might track with, right? If he feels an individual is not close, at least on that week, I can see we'll have to learn it over time, but whatever his default phrase, his default saying, whatever, if it's week to week, if it's, we'll have to see come Saturday how he's feeling, whatever it is. We'll learn that over time. And quite honestly, on this topic, this is the day-to-day debut for Joe Brady as the head coach in the NFL, but more specifically, of course, of the Buffalo Bills. So I like that we're kicking this off with this topic because essentially you had mentioned we don't buy into training camp hype when it comes to certain players or just performance based things we're going to hear on the day to day. The one thing you actually can learn from and take away from and start to grasp is what is the day to day Joe Brady look like? What is, how does he handle himself in front of the microphone? How is he handling himself in certain situations from day to day? Because one of the few positions, jobs of an NFL roster, of an NFL organization that kind of has to hit the ground running, even as camp reports now, is your head coach. When it comes to media obligations, when it comes to anything else that's going on the day to day, you have to be ready to go. Like you had done your prep, months ago in your teacher like summer off. Not that there's a summer off for an NFL head coach, but overall, you were doing your prep that day one of classes is today or tomorrow. Day one of classes is report to training camp. You are on. You need to be on. It's not like the players who can kind of ramp up during camp and start to get in game shape and get ready for preseason games to then inevitably start playing the games that matter. You are the head coach. You are of the coaching staff in general. All of them need to be ready day one. So it will be fun to kind of sit there and listen to his pressers. I will say I will be very locked in on those because I just want to learn kind of how he is going to hold himself in these media obligations and what kind of information would he divulge to what level. I think this is a great thing that you're bringing up here and kicking this off with because I believe he's not going to be fully transparent. I don't think any coaches, I don't think anyone that's been around a football organization or the NFL for a while would do so. And you mentioned kind of where he comes from, but I take him as an individual, at least, that is going to understand people that are asking him questions, people that are doing their job, being the media or whoever else, has to do, has to put something down that is at least worthy of being written. And he also understands he doesn't exactly have a track record or history that, I'm not trying to compare him to anyone, but like a Bill Belichick got away with it because it became his thing. He was known for it. That's what it is. Things like that. Brady has to now start to develop what that thing is. And early on, I bet if you dig back, I imagine even a Belichick was a little bit more open than what we learned him to be as he became the Hall of Fame coach early on. So it will be fun kind of this week once he sits in front of a mic, just, hey, how was camp? What's going on here? Media individuals asking about a good performance, first knock or injury or player that went to the sideline, how he responds to that, so on and so forth. It will be, that is probably, in my opinion, the most interesting thing to happen at camp, especially early on. But even as we progress through it, Joe Brady and just the coaching staff in general, how they're handling that kind of obligation will be fascinating.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it. Joe Brady seems like a player's coach, and I don't mean like give the players what he wants, but it seems like he bonds well with the players. He's of the similar age group. Maybe the players relate to him better. You hear things about Jamar Chase saying that he knew he was going to be a superstar head coach, things like that. Some topics I wanted to get into, and there's different positions on either side of the ball, and I sent you a list beforehand. I'm going to kind of be all over the place here, but the first one I want to talk about is nickel corner, because the big shoes to fill here is Taron Johnson. I know he was a lesser version of himself the last couple years, but it's been a while, Luka, since 2018 that we had to worry about who the starting nickel corner was going to be. And there's a lot of layers here, not just starting nickel corner, but how often are the Bills going to be in big nickel? What's the role of Chauncey Gardner-Johnson? Is he strictly a safety, or is he somebody that could get snaps at nickel? The Bills also drafted Jalen Kilgore in the 5th round. He's a safety, but also projects as somebody who could play nickel in the NFL. They signed D. Alford, but also you can't forget the fact that the Bills went out and drafted IGB David Igbenosum. I'm going to just butcher that. I'm going to call him IGB in the 2nd round on the heels of drafting Max Harrison in the 1st round the previous year. So I think I've put the puzzle together. I want to see what you think about my theory. I think D. Alford is going to be the nickel, and as long as he's healthy, it's going to be exclusively him. I do not think that the Bills are going to have Chauncey Gardner-Johnson play big nickel. I saw a stat come out from Summer Sports, but love that website. And it's important to keep in mind, we're referencing the Broncos defense where Jim Leonhard was. He was not the defensive coordinator. He was a high-ranking assistant, but that was Vance Joseph's defense. The Broncos played 0% of snaps in big nickel last season, which essentially means you have 5 defensive backs on the field, but it's 3 safeties and 2 corners. That's what we'd be talking about here with Kilgore or Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. So I do think that Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is going to exclusively be a safety for the Bills. I think Kilgore's path to playing is probably going to be more special teams versus being in the nickel. Where I think it could get interesting, Luka, and this is where I want to kick it to you, is there a chance that you could see Christian Benford, Maxwell Harrison, or even IGB getting nickel snaps? Because that wouldn't be a big nickel. That would, in theory, get the Bills' best 3 corners on the field if they are as high on IGB as we think. Who of that 3 do you think is most likely to play nickel? I don't think that's the likeliest. I really do think that it might be Harrison playing 75%, IGB playing 25%, and then Alford being exclusively slot. But how do you see the nickel position playing out?
It's a fair question. We're all speculating because it's something we haven't really seen yet. It's something we don't know or we're not familiar with. There's uncertainty, just to put it that way. There's no other way to describe it. I do think that the CJGJ idea is something that is not going to be there. I think the idea of the nickel back, the nickel corner position for this defense overall is going to be matchup based. I think overall, from what we understand, the Jim Leonhard way of, defense and where he comes from and all the examples we can try to pull from as of right now, it feels as if it's going to be who ends up lining in the nickel is almost secondary to just simply who is the opposition putting there for the nickel to be responsible for. And that, to me, is what it actually comes down to. I think it's going to be a lot more matchup based. I think it's going to be a lot more game-to-game situation, and truly could even be something where that is not known who's lining up in the slot for this defense until you break or the offense breaks and they see who ultimately, based on a look, is lined up there for the opposition. So, I would say D. Alford is obviously going to be the listed nickel. That feels as if that's absolutely going to happen. But I also wonder if there is going to be a little bit more of a what's the way to put this? If there's going to be a little bit more of a blend, kind of how you're pitching it, in the sense of based on the week to week, if let's say Detroit, because Detroit's number 1 receiver, quote unquote, really does play dominantly in the slot, Amon-Ra. And from there, depending on how they're trying to use him, Does it feel like Christian Benford's just a better matchup coverage wise on an Amon-Ra? Yes. Then you're probably going to see him lining up in the slot 70% of the time or whatever it is. That's what it's going to come down to. But then the following week, you're going to be playing whoever, and it's like, no, we need our boundary corners on the boundary, and D. Alford's going to be getting heavy snap share in that nickel spot and things like that. Or you have Igbinison just lined up there in the nickel spot because they like his frame and his size that week, maybe to contribute both in the coverage game, but then also maybe to be that more big nickel like we got used to with the Taron Johnson. So I think there's just going to be a week-to-week flavor about it. There's going to be, depends on the opponent, depends on the look, depends on what's being demanded of you as a defense that week. That ultimately will be that. It's going to be very much less, hey, we know Taron's active this week. He is your nickel. It doesn't matter who you're up against. You need Taron there in your nickel because he's that big nickel who can help defend the run even while you're sitting there with 5 DBs on the field, so on and so forth, which, was great in his time. It obviously, as you had mentioned, dwindled down late. He's getting a little bit long in the tooth now, and that's a hard position to play for a long period of time for what he was asked to do as well. That's going to break you down a little bit quicker. I think we're just going to realistically see a more what I would call traditional approach to the nickel or the slot corner position. And then even on top of it, it's going to be a week-to-week match-based situation overall.
Yeah, I think I didn't even think about it from that angle, but if they do identify Christian Benford as that type of corner that is worthy of just going after whoever the number one is, or like in your case, when Amon-Ra is gonna be the guy getting targets, do you put him in the slot? That would change the conversation. I do think that, Bishop, Gardner Johnson, Benford, and then some mix of Harrison or IGB are your predominant secondary players, and then you'll see a mix after that. Another couple things to think about, like how does Ed Oliver look? You would think he'd be healthy. Remember, he was active for the Broncos game. He had that bicep injury. He came back for the Carolina game and then got injured and was out really through the Broncos game in the playoffs. Michael Hoyt looked like found money when he was back. He played like his hair was on fire. He seems like he's going to be a perfect fit for this defense. What are they going to get out of him coming off of the torn Achilles? But really the last topic I want to get to on defense before we kick it to the offensive side is linebacker. I thought on our last episode, you made a good point about how linebacker is kind of becoming like the running back of defense, where teams view it as replaceable. You don't necessarily view it as a massive hole if you don't have ideal starting linebackers. But the Bills are certainly not in an ideal spot when it comes to linebacker. Their two starters from the playoff run, not Terrell Bernard, Matt Milano and Shaq Thompson are both free agents right now. Terrell Bernard is coming off by far his worst career since taking over the starting job. Year 2 of his career just looked like running in quicksand last year. You have to hope that was injury related and not just like human regression related. You would think that's more injury related because of his age. Dorian Williams really found his niche as a forward downhill linebacker who could blitz, but I don't know that he's ever going to be more than that. And do you feel good about him being your best linebacker? They did draft Caleb Alarms-Orr, who I think that we're all excited about. Joe Andreessen might be a better fit for this defense, but that's about it when it comes to linebacker. Luka, what would have to go wrong, or how quickly do you think Brandon Beane's finger would be itchy on speed dial to get a hold of either Matt Milano or Shaq Thompson, who were starters for this team last year, are still out there in the open market, bring them back, or even a player like, his name's escaping me, the guy that played on the Giants last year. There's other linebackers out there, like I wanted to say Ogletree, but that's not right. But anyway, how quickly do you think Brandon Beane would tap into free agency, knowing that there are starting level players out there?
I don't think it's going to be. Let's talk about it. Day one, early on training camp. I don't think he's itchy right now, and I don't even think early day performance evaluation of the roster is going to move the needle. This feels like you are hoping, I would say, that let's call it your top 3 off-ball guys being Dorian, Terrell Bernard, and then Elam's Orr are good, healthy, make it through training camp, make it through preseason, and come week one, those three are good. Joe Andreessen as well, you hope is healthy because he's most likely going to make the roster for his special teams contribution, as well as being a depth style off ball guy himself. He can play the mic position, all of that. So it smells like it's, hey, we are going to go with these four. And in my personal opinion, I'm okay with those four, but I also subscribe to the idea of something you just said. I mentioned it last episode where it's like linebackers to me are starting to become that plug and play running back style position where do not be dropping a lot of money on that. Try to just find guys who can be fit in a system that you've surrounded with better talent on the line of scrimmage and behind them, that they just command the role from there. You need a competent green dot guy, of course, like that is important. I'm not trying to discourage anything when it comes to your true Mike, your play caller, your general on the field, and hopefully Terrell Bernard is healthier again. We get to see what was not last season, but the season and two before that out of him. And it was more of just a health situation. But, I think if we were to see, let's say the rookie Erlam Zor goes down, preseason game one, and it's not necessarily a serious injury, but it's one that could eat into the remainder of his preseason where they start to flirt with the idea and understanding that he might not be even 100% come week one. That's when I think he might, Brandon Beane, as in Brandon Beane is going to dip into that well of, Matt's still sitting there. Give him a call. He didn't get banged up through offseason, but there's a familiarity in the building at least with him. It's not with the defense at all, that's for sure. But hey, he knows where he needs to get around the place, or Shaq Thompson, whoever they're more comfortable with, will bring him in, see what we can do. And then from there, you would hope that then you're managing your practice squad and your roster cut down and stuff in this particular scenario to then accommodate that situation where once Erlam Zor is back, you either stash him on the practice squad, whatever it is overall that I don't think he's itchy for it right now, but I do think it's one of a situation where you absolutely might even be reaching out to them, if as soon as you see someone get knocked, being like, hey, how's life? How are you doing? You feel healthy? Everything good? Stuff like that. Stay close to your phone. Like that is to me what I think it's like. Maybe even Bean does that proactively with a bunch of players they have as, we'll call them priority free agents. And that feels like it's probably good practice by NFL GMs everywhere to have those guys you just at least reach out to, and it's kind of, or at least reach out to the representation, their agents, and be like, hey, like, how is your client doing? Whatever, stuff like that. Like, just want to have a good relationship so that it doesn't feel out of the blue when you hit up the agent and be like, hey, can you come into Buffalo? Can you come into Rochester? And we'll discuss a contract situation because we might need to bring you in, so on and so forth. That I don't think it's concerning or itchy right out the gate, but it's going to take is one knock for Bean to probably, reach out to the player and representation and be like, let's see if we can maybe figure out something that could work if we need to.
The Giants player I was trying to think of was Bobby Okereke.
Yeah.
And he might be somebody that even is a better scheme fit than a Milano or a Thompson, but that the Bills want to go with the familiarity of a Thompson. Like you said, they know the player. Another guy that's out there is a future Hall of Famer who had a very great rated season last year, based on Jeremy Fowler's lists, based on PFF. Bobby Wagner, that would be an instant starter. So that's something the Bills could look at. I would assume he's going to be on a team at some point if he wants to play. Kind of odd that he's still out there, but that's just the way the NFL is going. It's the way linebackers are going. Let's shift around to offense. Luka, there were times in our Bills fandom, whether it was J.P. Lossman, Trent Edwards, E.J. Manuel, where we would just we get this Josh Allen at first, like this new young toy at quarterback, and it's like, let's track every practice. How's he looking? How's he looking? We don't have that, obviously. We feel pretty good about the fact that Josh Allen's good. Is Keon Coleman the most interesting player for the Bills in training camp?
Ooh,
I
the
say that
most.
with the context of the fact that he trained with Stevie Johnson this offseason, the fact that Stevie Johnson's raved about his maturity and said he was surprised by it, and the fact that it really feels like, second year in a row. If Keon hits his ceiling, the whole conversation about receiver changes.
Yeah, you know what? I'll edit it. He's the most polarizing player in training camp. He is going to be the one that moves the needle the most out of any player personnel that you could see, because I was trying to think, some other alternative candidates. Skylar Bell, rookie, but fascinating one, I think, is in the conversation, just to keep it even a receiver more. DJ Moore, of course, is another one that people are going to be interested in a lot, because you want to see what that relationship looks like early on in practices with 17. To kind of go off of there, we have other topics we'll get into that I'm not going to name here, but they're more secondary, maybe for the sense of they're not as flashy. I will say fullback is a topic we're not going to talk about, but I will be interested, especially with years past of Joe Brady. The run game and that fullback position is important, and we don't have the individual that has been there this whole time now. So we have Ben Van Summeren right now listed as the starting fullback. Is he going to be serviceable in that position? Defensive side, I think, is I wouldn't. I don't think there's anyone that's polarizing enough there other than CJGJ in just his own unique way. So yeah, I would say the biggest needle mover, though, the most polarizing individual at camp is Keon, and I think that's valid. If Keon is not already at his ceiling, not trying to dig the guy, but if he's not already there and there is a ceiling that he can get to that some and a lot believe can still be in there, it does change the conversation, as you said, about receiver a lot. That pushes a Josh Palmer off the field a little bit more, and or if Josh Palmer gets hurt, like it seems like inevitably comes for him, unfortunately, you can feel better about yourself with Keon stepping in a more bigger role with him to plug in for that. And yeah, I think right now your top three are pretty set without that happening, being DJ Moore, Josh Palmer, and Khalil Shakir, of course, in the slot. And then you really have Keon standing a little bit ahead of everyone else in that depth receiver situation. But Skylar Bell can, of course, wow some things, do some things. He's an unknown commodity you have in-house that he could, shoot up the depth, shoot up the expectations, and really make a name for himself early on if things go well. And then your sixth receiver that may or may not make the roster day one is going to be a fascinating one that I don't think Keon's in threat of being a cut candidate and being that kind of sixth guy. But at the same time, I mean, if he has a bad camp, if preseason games are going well, if it seems like there's a complete lack of confidence, even with all of this offseason work that he had done with, Stevie Johnson, you had mentioned, and so on and so forth, I don't see him being part of that. But at the same time, it could, just because the honeymoon of his rookie is obviously far and over. The last year I think was a disappointment, of course, but even then, I mean, sophomore slumps are always a known thing. It's something that happens. This is still a kid realistically when you put it all together. That this now becomes the first year where there are expectations of you as a professional. There are expectations of you at the position. What can you do with this opportunity now to hopefully take that next step? But also, Keon Coleman is the prime example of why you can't assume progression is automatic. Progression is going to happen. He feels like the perfect example of that, because there is no person in this world that can tell you that they fully expect him to progress in a positive manner at all with any sort of legitimate backing. It would be blind faith at that point in time. So I'll give that to you. I'll give you Keon is the most interesting in the sense of polarization and needle moving going into this camp for sure.
I wonder how open the Bills would be to somebody overtaking Joshua Palmer, whether it's a Keon Coleman just having a monster camp and showing strong rapport with Josh Allen. I would give a lesser chance to Skylar Bell. I'd be surprised, I mean, pleasantly surprised, but I just don't feel like that's the way they would go right off the bat. I think they would want to ease him in. But I do think that wide receiver three competition, I mean, Shakir and Moore, 1, 2, Moore 1, Shakir 2 seem locked in. Obviously, you're going to get Kincaid in there a lot, Knox in there a lot. You mentioned Gilliam. I don't know if it's really a true fullback, but like who's the guy that's going to be giving Josh Allen the shove in the tush push situations? Because we can laugh about it, but like holy cow, that got to a point where the Bills were so automatic with it that there was 4th-and-1 situations in both playoff games where their season was on the line, and I was sitting there cool as a cucumber, knowing they were going to get it. Who takes over that role? My thought maybe Ray Davis. I wonder if that's the spot where he could come in and help the team out. Let's talk about offensive line. There's a lot of layers here. One thing the Bills did not do this offseason was restructure Deion Dawkins. And that can be for a number of reasons. Maybe there wasn't a move to be made, but that was a lever we had talked about early in the offseason. The Bills could have pulled if they wanted to go out and get, say, like a Max Crosby or somebody that became available that they just had to get in on. But what that means is Dawkins now, since they didn't kick his guaranteed money down the road, becomes very easy to get out from under next offseason. Don't forget that in the draft, in the very early 4th round, the Bills took Jude Bowery at a point where there were still a lot of talented players left. And he's a guy that projects to be both left or right tackle. Both of those things put together tell me that this is a big year for Deion Dawkins. He still made the NFL top 100 list. He was an honorable mention in Jeremy Fowler's list. I think relatively to the rest of the sport, he's probably still, like an upper level offensive lineman, not elite, but maybe the next grouping. But there's definitely signs that maybe it's going in the wrong direction, although he's talked about the fact that he's going to come in trimmer than he's ever been before, and we'll see what that looks like. But after that, this is going to be the first time in a couple years where the Bills have a starting position open on their offensive line. David Edwards went to New Orleans, and now you have a situation where it could be Alec Anderson, who was the 6th man for this group. It could be Austin Corbett, who the Bills brought in via free agency on a bargain deal. It felt kind of similar to when they brought in David Edwards. You're not excited about it. Maybe you put him in there and he's just a perfect fit. In-house, they also have Tylen Grable, which if you want to get back to the Jude Bowery conversation, maybe after losing Ryan Vandemark, maybe they projected Tylen Grable to be more of a guard this year and compete for a starting job. We know they love the player. He just can't stay healthy. And does that mean that Bowery now is a priority because they need that third tackle? And then what about Bowery? Is Bowery somebody that they just viewed as such good value at that point? Let's just grab him, and maybe he's one of their best 5. The last two things I just said, I'd say probably are the least likely. Curious about Grable, but I really feel like sitting here on Monday, it's going to come down to Alec Anderson, Austin Corbett. You were telling me off the air you have a very big rooting interest in that one.
Yeah, it's a rooting interest for a specific reason I'll get into. And I don't even think, did you even mention the name Nick Broker? I'm not even sure.
Oh,
I was
no,
trying
I didn't.
Yeah. So like, that's just another one to throw in the pot. I don't think he's, like leading the charge for it or anything. And that's not who I would put my money on. I mentioned Austin Corbett off air before we started going. And the reason being is not anything truly against Alec Anderson, the individual and player. When it comes to this offensive line and what's asked of it, the ironic part of it all going into this year is you mentioned Deion Dawkins was talking about he's going to go in as trim as ever, although the new uniforms don't exactly make anyone look trim, including the pictures he put out, shots fired. So the tackles in the center, though, need to be more athletic and able to move because they do get moved a lot. And the guards, ironically, I feel like don't move as much as most teams utilize a guard in the sense of pulling them and stuff. They absolutely do. But for instance, you're not seeing Osiris Torrance get up and move very often. And I mean, he's just a massive human being. It'd be very difficult for him to move a shit ton a lot and often. But that's fine. He's a phone booth guard. You let him just kind of sit in his safe space, and he does an excellent job doing it. Alec Anderson is undersized from what I feel like this offensive line performs best at when it comes to the guard position. And Austin Corbett just feels more appropriate, I guess would be the way to put it. Where, just north of 300 pounds, 6'4", just a big individual who can still move a little bit and everything in that. But from what we've seen from this offensive line over the recent years, as they've been now known to be one of the better units in the league, and I forget who it was, but someone recently put them out as the fourth best offensive line going into this season. I know last year,
Brandon Thorne.
Brandon Thorne, thank you. And then last year during the Trenchy Awards, an awards show shown on the McAfee show, they were actually awarded the best unit by them. They had no individual player that won a Trenchy, quote unquote. It's, like an Oscar, but overall they were labeled as the best cohesive unit due to their season long performance. And it's deservingly so. They were a very efficient group and they all did a great job. But all of that success, what you had in your guard position specifically, I don't know if I necessarily buy into it as much that Alec Anderson's going to be able to provide you what you want compared to potentially what you can get out of Austin Corbett. If through training camp and preseason and everything like that, they believe Alec Anderson's going to be the best person, I'm going to subscribe to whatever they're going to feed me about that. Let me just also put that on record. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm an offensive line expert. We watch a lot of football and we see a lot of things, but at the same time, I'm not sitting there evaluating the offensive line as the first thing I want to watch, because at the end of the day, that's not something I have knowledge of. I have friends and acquaintances that are former offensive line at whatever their respective levels that I would honestly trust the word of before my own, because they have an eye for what they need to understand, D1 or not, whatever. It's they understand the position at a level that I know I would never. So then on top of it all, now there's the people that are actually getting paid to make the decision. If they go, hey, Alec Anderson is going to be the best person in this position to move us forward, I'm not going to sit here and be like, week 2 against the Lions, it wasn't going so well, and I'm just like finger pointing Alec Anderson unless it is fully deserving, and be like, we need to be changing that immediately, just because I don't subscribe to the belief that he's the best person there based on his measurables and anything like that. So I just feel like as we go into training camp, what we've had in years past and where the success has come from, and Austin Corbett feels like it fits a little bit better and just might even be a little bit more of a seamless transition. But I will also just give the final point of 4 of the 5 that are coming back are top level guys at their respective positions, respected individuals at their positions. And it's nice that the one hole you have is not a tackle or center. It's a guard. Guard is the most disguisable, I would say, hole to have. It's why if you even go into a week down an offensive lineman, if it's a guard, it's still not optimal, but it's something you can definitely work around and manage, rather than losing one of your bookends, or of course your signal caller at the line and the individual that needs to get the ball to your quarterback every single play. So I am going to be paying attention a lot to this. This was the position I said I knew we were going to be getting to in this episode when I was talking about maybe more interesting players, when you had brought up Keon Coleman. I will be interested in watching Alec Anderson and anyone else potentially filling that left guard spot, just to see how they look, both from a physical standpoint, but then just, what's making sense. It will be an interesting one, because we just haven't been here, as you had mentioned, recently. The offensive line has been pretty set in its ways for the past few seasons. That's been one of the strengths of them, as a cohesive unit. They all knew what they were doing, and they were doing it at a very high level. So it will be intriguing to see if Alec Anderson does take that step and become our new starting caliber left guard, or if we do end up having an Austin Corbett, a Nick Broker, or a Jude Bowery, or whatever, end up sliding into that role, because Alec Anderson just does not necessarily fit that role as great as it was hoped going into training camp.
Yeah, I'm excited for Corbett too. And I like Alec Anderson as a depth player. He reminds me a lot of Ryan Bates, where he can get you out of a game or get you through a stretch at all 5 positions. He could play center, both tackles, both guards, but I don't think he's an ideal starter for you. Austin Corbett played nearly 700 snaps last season for the Panthers. He had a pretty decently high rated season. I mean, if you look at PFF, he rated higher than Osiris Torrance. Take that for what it's worth. And he's a guy that's played well in his career. It just has been ill-timed injuries. Tore his ACL the last game of the season, I think, for the Rams. Each time he's come up for free agency, it seems like something has hurt him, and now he gets a prove-it deal with the Bills. This is a guy that's hungry. The story just kind of appeals to me. I think those are the major stories, Luka. I mean, it's always going to be, can Dalton Kincaid stay healthy? How does Tyler Bass look? That's not nothing to me. The Bills don't have any competition on their roster at kicker. They did have Matt Prater last year, who really settled the position down, and to the point where he's kicking a game tying field goal at the buzzer in Denver from like 50 yards, and you're just like cool as a cucumber, like, oh, we'll be fine. See you in overtime. Um, Outside of that, did the Bills dip their toe into the veteran water? Stephon Diggs is still out there. Before we started recording, Vita Vea's name got thrown out there. That's certainly somebody who would help this Bills defense, I would say. I don't know if the Bills can play in those waters. We shall see. But before we get out of here, Luka, before we hit end on this episode, we have to talk about the Nickel City uniforms that you referenced earlier. Just, I don't get it. I get it, but I don't get it. Teams are just coming up with ways to make alternate uniforms. They have the rivalry series. Major League Baseball has the City Connect jerseys. It's any different rendition you come up with to make fans buy a different uniform. I get it. And this is a new spin on the Bills, a new spin on the Bills logo. All of that being said, it looks nothing like a Bills helmet to me and to most fans. The color combination, I think, had potential, but I don't understand what they were going for from a design standpoint. This is not the first time a team has come out with hideously ugly uniforms, and it left a good portion of the fan base being like, what is this? The Steelers had some atrocity a few years ago. The Lions had one very similar to this a few years back. But all in all, the Bills hyped this up. It feels like a shout out to the blue collar. There's even a blue collar on these jerseys. But it feels like they kind of missed the mark.
It very much has, for people that are Sabres fans, it very much has Turd Burger uniform reveal vibes to it. And there's the memes out there of Steve Ott. They just dubbed the new Bills uniform over what was the Turd Burger uniform of his time. If anyone doesn't understand the nickname Turd Burger, that was what they had called that. What was it? Half gold, half blue, weird alternate uniform that luckily came and went very quick. But it's the funniest part about this, in my own individual opinion, is I don't think the jerseys standalone are that bad. I think they're whatever. I gave them on my own Twitter account, I gave them a C-. It's like I could take them or leave them. I'm never selecting them in a Bills game unless I'm really bored, and I would probably pair them with like blue pants rather than just going all gray if I wanted to. But it's like, okay, whatever. The helmet, though, is just all-time miss. I had made the comment, truly the designer, it felt like whoever actually put time in it, if it wasn't just an AI bot, that just sat there and looked at the Seahawks helmet after winning the Super Bowl and went, how can we make that logo style and helmet a Bills logoed helmet? And then they just looked over at the Bills logo, saw the charged tip of it, and were like, we could blend that in the back in a little diagonal, and it comes out and gets to only about the side of your head, and it's perfect. And then just blue elsewhere because it's going to be blue and gray uniforms. And it's just an all-time miss. It's just that helmet's going to come and go. The report was that they're going to be wearing these for 2 games this season. Fascinated to know what 2 games they're going to be wearing those for. It's money. It's all business. I get it. And teams are going to do that. The Sabres are going to be coming out with, the NHL is doing a whole nother jersey promotion thing this year after doing other stuff. It's going to be City Connect stuff in the NHL this year. And it's just going to be another version of the goat head, supposedly, for the Sabres. It's another opportunity to sell jerseys. This is the NFL, and this is what the Bills are doing. You come out with a new uniform after last year having your Nike Rival series. You now have this City Connect style Nickel City thing. I do find it funny from a national perspective how little people understood the Nickel City connection to the Bills, even though it's very minimal, even in my eyes. But overall, it was everyone was just very perplexed by that being the inspiration from a national perspective, and it's a massive miss. I just also would say the turd burgers, the slugs, which are starting to get kind of vibey again these day and age. These uniforms, the last year's Nike rivals for the Bills, the arena football style 2000s Bills uniforms. There's always people that like them just as much as people that don't, and this uniform will have that as well. Shout out to the person I don't remember as I doom scrolled one time during the day, but they had made a great point where it simply said, there are going to be people that like this uniform, so don't be out there bashing them just because it ticks them in the right way while it doesn't for you. And I think the overwhelmingly reaction is it's not good. In my opinion, I share that same opinion. But if anyone's out there buying the jersey, I'm not going to bash them, give them disgusting looks, whatever. It's like, hey, people have unique tastes. I think it was the early 2000s. Like it was right after like the 9/11 time. Like a lot of the teams were putting out not to wear on the field, but you just had like your Desert Storm style jerseys where it was like gray, silver with then just they chose a color to do the lettering and numbers in. I have a Saints one randomly because I'd won it somewhere. It's a Saints Reggie Bush one. And I remember they'd put those out. They're weird looking. You don't see them out in the wild very often, but I actually kind of low key like it because the silver with gold numbering is just very unique in my opinion. It's just a fun little thing to look at in my closet most of the time, but it's just, there are just people that are going to like these things, and I get it. And I hope anyone that likes them goes out and buys one if they like it so much, because it's going to be one that's going to be probably very rare in 5-10 years. You're not going to see too many people wearing these things. But I'm not looking forward to seeing them on the field. I'm hoping they look a lot better on TV. That's my immediate reaction after being disgusted by them, Josh. And this is how I feel about any bad uniform for what it's worth, is I really hope it looks good on TV. Because if it looks good, you're not going to think about it. I think you even said the tweet too. As soon as kickoff starts, you're just thinking about whatever's happening in live play and stuff like that. You don't give a shit what they're wearing. It doesn't matter. It's secondary. But also, like, you just want it to look good because then, for instance, the reverse retro program that the NHL did, where that was the goat heads that were predominantly white with a little bit of blue and yellow flair to them, looked cool in person. Then you saw them on TV and you're like, oh, these are really bad to watch on TV. Like these are, do not be wearing, like it's just all white look with just some colored trim, and it looked terrible. So I'm hoping for this particular uniform, it's at least one that is decent to look at on TV. Although I'm not confident that the helmet's going to look good in any capacity, in any media, in any form, whatever. It's just, that is a massive F- miss, man. Just brutal.
The helmet made me think, like, you know how Josh Allen wears those Oshai Children's Hospital uh, mock-ups that I believe the kids draw them and he wears, and I think it's
Yeah,
really
the
cool.
hats. Yeah.
Yeah, and like what the kids draw the Bills logo from memory, and it's really cute. And it's almost like the helmet looks worse than those, and those are like an adorable 5-year-old, drawing from memory. But yeah, I'm with you. As soon as the game starts, like I put the tweet out that as soon as the game starts, I really don't care what they're wearing. It'll be interesting to see. I'm not the target audience for this. I am kind of past the jersey buying stage of my life, although I do own 2 Josh Allen jerseys. I actually like the gray hat. I think it looks okay. I put it out on Twitter. I was like, the hat's not bad. Air Raid's like, that's a $5 hat at Walmart. So, mixed opinions. But to Luca's point, people like what they like.
Yep.
If you like these jerseys, don't let anybody tell you that they're bad. Whatever you like it. Don't yuck
Yep.
someone's yum, as they say. But anyway, speaking of yucking someone's yum, Luca's not somebody that follows like super closely, like, oh my God, he had 3 catches at training camp practice. This is so amazing. And then I'm like, oh wow, look at him. He had 3 catches today. He's going to be a star. So Luca doesn't like preseason. I like preseason. So, we all have different opinions here. But the biggest point is football season's almost here. The next time you hear our voices, we'll have actual training camp practices to talk about. Let's get there. We'll be back next week for a brand new episode of Bills Chat. For Luca, I am Josh McCarty. We will talk to you next week on Bill's Chat.